The meeting was meant to be a moment of peace, a turning point in the ongoing war between the human race and the alien forces known as the Varn. Both factions, though wary, had agreed to come to the neutral planet of Solara to discuss a ceasefire. There was hope in the air, a sense of possibility. Yet, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. The human soldier stood in the crowd, his eyes focused on the alien queen. She was the leader of the Varn, a race feared for their power and ruthless ways. Her presence was commanding. She had the kind of beauty that only someone born of alien blood could possess. Her sharp features, her long silver hair, and the regal, almost ethereal aura that surrounded her. She was tall, at least 7 feet, with an air of grace that seemed too perfect to be real. She stood among her people like a queen, as though she were above it all. The human soldier, whose name was Lieutenant Jack Turner, had been assigned to this peace meeting as part of the protection detail. He wasn't interested in the politics of it. He didn't care about the Varn or their queen. He was a soldier, trained to fight, to protect, and to survive. But as he looked at the alien queen, something about her held his attention. There was a sharpness to her eyes, something that told him she was not as invincible as she appeared. It didn't take long for things to go wrong. The peace talks had barely begun when an explosion rocked the hall. It was a blast so strong it sent the room into chaos. People screamed and rushed for cover. Gunfire rang out from the balcony, where insurgents from both sides had infiltrated the gathering, intent on sabotaging the fragile peace. The queen, in the center of it all, looked like she had been struck by the shockwave. She staggered, her legs buckling beneath her, and fell to the floor. Lieutenant Turner reacted instantly. He'd been trained for moments like this, though he never expected it to be in the presence of an alien queen. His first instinct was to move. Without thinking, he sprinted across the room, weaving through the chaos. He reached the queen just as her head hit the floor. Blood spilled from a wound on her forehead, staining her silver hair. His hands trembled as he knelt beside her. The sight of her lying there, vulnerable, was jarring. She was a queen, a leader of an entire species. And now she was helpless, surrounded by the dead and dying. Her strength, her pride, all of it had been stripped away in an instant. Jack's heart raced. He didn't know what to do. He wasn't a doctor, and he had no idea what kind of treatment an alien queen might need. But he couldn't leave her here to die. "Hold on," he muttered to himself, though he didn't even know if she could hear him. His voice was barely audible over the sound of the gunfire. There was no time to waste. He knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let her die here. With a grunt, Jack lifted her. She was far heavier than he expected, her alien frame more solid than it appeared. Her long limbs hung loosely as he pulled her into his arms, and for a moment he wasn't sure if he could hold her. But he pushed through, adrenaline coursing through his veins. His legs shook as he started to move, his eyes darting around the room for any sign of escape. He had no plan, no clear path. All he knew was that he had to get her to safety. He pushed forward, each step heavier than the last. The sounds of war raged around him, but he focused on the queen. Her body felt delicate in his arms, almost fragile. He couldn't understand how someone so powerful, so dangerous, could be reduced to this, helpless, fragile, and vulnerable. But as he looked down at her, something changed in him. His mission, his duty to protect, was no longer just about orders. It was about the woman in his arms. Jack reached a small doorway at the side of the hall, leading to a narrow passage. He pushed through, the weight of the queen growing unbearable with each step, but he refused to stop. His hands were slick with sweat, his body on the edge of exhaustion, but he continued. There was no choice. After what felt like an eternity, Jack finally reached the medical bay. The room was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. He carefully laid the queen down on an examination table, his hands shaking as he did so. Her skin, though pale, was still warm to the touch. Her chest rose and fell, shallow but steady. Jack didn't know if she was going to survive, but he was going to make sure she had a chance. For the first time, he looked at her properly. The queen's eyes were closed, but the delicate features of her face were still striking, even in her current state. Her silver hair, long and flowing, had been stained with blood, but there was still something majestic about her. Her beauty, even in such a weakened state, was undeniable. Jack found himself caught in the strange feeling of awe. He'd never considered the Varn in this way. Humanity had always seen them as the enemy.
But now, seeing the queen like this, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of leader she truly was.
He turned to the medical equipment, his hands moving quickly as he assessed what was available. A few of the medics had already been called away to other parts of the base, but Jack knew enough to do the basics. He cleaned the wound on her forehead, making sure it wasn't life-threatening. Her breathing steadied, and he allowed himself a small breath of relief. But there was still no guarantee. The silence in the room felt heavy. Jack's mind raced as he worked. He tried not to think about the larger implications of what he had done. He had saved the enemy, the person his people were supposed to be fighting. He had no idea how the others would react when they found out. But for now, none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was the queen in front of him. After several long moments, her eyelids fluttered. Jack stepped back slightly, unsure of what to expect. When her eyes opened, they locked onto his. For a second, there was nothing but silence between them. And then, her voice, weak but steady, broke the stillness. "Why?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. Jack swallowed hard, his throat dry. He had no answer. Why had he done it? Why had he saved her? He couldn't explain it, not to her or to himself. "I couldn't leave you," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. She studied him for a moment, as though trying to figure out if he was telling the truth. Her expression softened, but there was no warmth in it. There was only the cool gaze of a queen who had just been saved by her enemy.
"You saved me," she murmured. "Why?"
Jack didn't have an answer for her, not one that would make sense, but as he stood there watching her, something inside him shifted. In that moment, the alien queen was no longer a distant, unreachable figure of power. She was just a person, vulnerable and human in her own way. And for the first time, Jack saw her not as an enemy, but as someone who might just be capable of change. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the medical equipment around them. The alien queen lay still on the table, her breathing steady, but her body still weakened from the blast. Jack Turner, the human soldier, stood nearby, watching over her as she rested. He had done all he could to stop the bleeding and keep her stable, but now it was up to time and her own strength to heal. The queen had been unconscious for hours, but she was beginning to stir. Jack watched her closely, ready to help if she needed anything. But he was unsure of what exactly she needed. She had always been a figure of power in his mind, someone who would never show vulnerability. Yet here she was, lying in front of him, small and fragile, far from the mighty alien leader he had imagined. As her eyes fluttered open once again, Jack stepped forward. The queen blinked, confused at first, before her gaze landed on him. There was no anger in her eyes, no suspicion, just a quiet curiosity. "You're awake," Jack said, trying to sound calm, though his heart raced. The queen didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where am I?" Her words were slow, like she was still waking up from a deep sleep. Jack hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to explain. It was a strange thing caring for someone who had once been his enemy. But now, in this moment, she was just another person in need of help. He took a deep breath. "You're in a safe place," he said simply. "The attack?" He stopped himself. There was no need to explain what had happened. She had been there. She knew the chaos that had taken place. What she didn't know was what had happened after. What she didn't know was why a human soldier had decided to save her. "I carried you here," Jack added quietly. "You were injured. I didn't want you to die." The Queen's eyes narrowed as she processed his words. She looked down at her body, as though surprised to find herself alive. Her hand moved to her forehead, feeling the bandage Jack had placed there to stop the bleeding. She winced, but there was no sign of anger in her eyes, just a deep, silent contemplation. "You saved me," she repeated, as if testing the words. Jack nodded, but said nothing. The silence between them felt heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. There was an unspoken understanding that neither of them fully knew what to say next. "Why?" The question came again, this time louder, as if she was demanding an answer. Jack shifted his weight from one foot to the other, trying to find the right words. He had never considered the why before. He had simply acted on instinct, as he always did in moments of danger. But saving the Queen was different. It wasn't like anything he had ever done before. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I just couldn't let you die." The Queen studied him again, her alien features softening for a brief moment. "You risked your life to save me," she said, "and yet you are my enemy." "Why would you do such a thing?" Jack's chest tightened as he considered her words. She was right. He was a soldier, part of a force that had fought against her kind for years. He had been trained to view the Varn as the enemy, to never question his orders. Yet, in that moment, none of that mattered. The person in front of him, injured and vulnerable, was not an enemy. She was just someone who needed help. "I don't know," Jack repeated, his voice quieter now. "Maybe I saw something in you, something more than just an enemy." The Queen seemed to contemplate this, her gaze never leaving his face. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Jack wasn't sure what to say next. They were both in unfamiliar territory, trying to make sense of a situation neither of them could have predicted. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Queen spoke again, her voice low but steady. "You are a soldier, yes? Trained to fight and protect your own. You carry a weapon, but you did not use it on me. You did not let me die." Jack nodded, a sense of unease creeping over him. He had never questioned his training before. It had always been clear: protect the human race, destroy the enemy. But standing here now, with the Queen looking at him, he wasn't so sure anymore. The lines between right and wrong, enemy and ally, had become blurry. He didn't know if he could ever go back to seeing things the way he once had. "I'm not sure what to do now," Jack admitted.
"But I couldn't let you die."
The Queen's expression softened, but there was still something guarded in her eyes. She seemed torn between gratitude and confusion, between recognizing the kindness in Jack's actions and the deep-rooted conflict between their species.
For a moment she looked vulnerable, and Jack wondered if she, too, was questioning everything she had ever believed.
"I do not understand," she said quietly. "Why do you value my life?"
"What would you gain by helping me?"
The war between our people is what keeps us fighting,"
Jack interrupted gently.
Whoa.
The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly, as if considering his words. She was the Queen, the ruler of an empire, and Jack was just a soldier.
In any other circumstance, she would have seen him as nothing more than an enemy, an obstacle to be removed. But now, in this strange, quiet moment, there was no enemy. There was only Jack and the Queen. Two people caught in a situation neither had chosen. "I don't know what this means," the Queen said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "But I feel something different from you. You are not like the others. Jack didn't know how to respond to that. He had never been told that he was different. To the humans, he was just a soldier, nothing more. And to the Varn, he was an enemy. But right now, in this moment, it didn't matter what either side thought. He had saved her because it was the right thing to do, not because of orders or duty. "I'm not sure what any of this means," Jack said softly. "But I think we both deserve a chance to figure it out." For the first time, the Queen's face softened, and Jack could see a flicker of something in her eyes. Something like hope. It was fleeting, gone, before he could fully grasp it, but it was there. And in that moment, Jack realized that whatever happened next, whatever the future held for them, it wasn't just about the war. It was about something much deeper, something that neither of them fully understood yet. Jack stood there for a long while, watching over the Queen as she rested. He didn't know how the rest of the story would unfold. He didn't know if the war between their people would ever end. But one thing was certain. He had just made the first step in an unexpected journey, and he wasn't going to walk it alone. The air was thick with tension as the human ambassador stepped off the transport ship, his boots making a soft clink against the polished floor of the alien palace. He had been to many diplomatic meetings, but this was unlike any he had ever faced before. His mission was clear. Negotiate a treaty that could secure peace between humanity and the most powerful empire in the galaxy. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. He had expected a meeting with the ruling council, perhaps a grand ceremony where both sides would exchange words of peace and cooperation. Instead, he was led through a vast hallway to a towering throne room where the alien queen awaited. Her reputation had preceded her. Whispers of her calculating mind, her iron grip over her people, and the unyielding force she commanded had spread across every corner of the galaxy. But none of the stories prepared him for what he saw. The Queen was a sight to behold. Standing taller than any human, her skin shimmered with an almost otherworldly sheen, a mixture of silver and deep violet. Her eyes, sharp and cold, never left the ambassador as he stepped forward, his heart racing despite himself. She was a being of power, and there was no mistaking the weight of her presence in the room. The ambassador took a deep breath and bowed respectfully, hoping to mask his unease. The Queen, however, did not move. She simply watched him, her piercing gaze like a blade cutting through him. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating, until she finally spoke.
"Human," she said, her voice low and commanding. "You stand before me to negotiate peace, yet you have not yet proven your worth. You will do something for me first."
He blinked, taken aback. He had heard of the Queen's ruthless reputation, but he had not expected such an immediate challenge. "Your Majesty," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I am here to represent humanity and offer peace between our civilizations." The Queen's lips curled into a thin smile.
"Peace? You seek peace, but you have no understanding of the stakes."
"If you want this treaty, you will need to prove your value to me, and I will not wait forever." The ambassador felt a cold sweat forming on his brow. His training had prepared him for many things: diplomatic challenges, negotiations, and even the occasional threat. But this was something else entirely. It was as if the Queen had already made up her mind about him before he had even spoken a word. I will do whatever is necessary, Your Majesty," he said, trying to steady his voice. "What do you ask of me?" The Queen's gaze did not waver. She stood up slowly, her movements fluid and graceful. Yet there was an undeniable sense of authority in every step she took. "I have a daughter," she said. "A daughter who is of age, and who has much to offer our empire. But she is stubborn. And she has refused to marry as I see fit." The ambassador's mind raced. He had heard rumors of the Queen's daughter, a powerful princess in her own right, but he had not known the full extent of her defiance. In many ways, she was as feared as her mother. But now, the Queen's words left no room for doubt. "You will marry her," the Queen continued, her voice cold as ice. "Immediately." The ambassador froze, his heart skipping a beat. He had heard the Queen's demand, but he was not sure he had fully understood it. "Marry, your daughter?" he repeated, his voice shaky. The Queen nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing. "Yes, you will marry her, and in doing so, you will prove your loyalty and your worth. Only then will I consider the peace treaty. Only then will I decide whether humanity is truly deserving of our alliance." The ambassador stood in stunned silence. His mind raced, trying to process what he had just been told. He had come here to secure peace, to forge an agreement that would benefit both civilizations, not to become entangled in royal politics and a forced marriage. "But, Your Majesty," he began, his voice trembling despite himself, "I am a human diplomat. My people—" "I am not concerned with your people," the Queen interrupted sharply. "I am concerned with the future of my empire, and if you want your precious treaty, you will do as I say." The ambassador felt a surge of frustration, but he quickly tamped it down. This was no time for rebellion. His mission was too important. Amore stepped through the entrance. He had to find a way to navigate this new, unexpected challenge. I will meet with your daughter, Your Majesty," he said, trying to regain control of the situation. "But I must ask, what is it that you truly want from this union?" The Queen's smile grew colder.
"I want my daughter to understand that she cannot control everything. She must learn obedience, or else the Empire will fall into chaos."
"You, human, are the tool I will use to teach her that lesson." The ambassador swallowed hard. He was no stranger to power plays, but this was something else entirely. He was being used as a pawn in a game he had not asked to join. Still, there was no turning back now. His mission depended on it.
"Very well,"
he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him.
"I will do what is required. I will marry your daughter."
The Queen's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Good."
"You will meet her soon. I trust you will not disappoint me."
As the ambassador was escorted out of the throne room, his mind was in turmoil. He had come here with the hope of securing peace, but now he found himself caught in the web of alien politics and royal intrigue, and as he prepared to meet the princess, he couldn't shake the feeling that his role in this affair was far more complicated than he had ever imagined. What had he gotten himself into? The palace corridors were vast, stretching far beyond what the ambassador could see. With each step, he felt more isolated from the world he knew. His mission to secure peace for humanity had now transformed into something he hadn't expected. Forced into a situation where his personal feelings would clash with his professional duty, the ambassador's mind was a whirl of thoughts. As he walked down the long hallways, flanked by two towering alien guards, he couldn't help but think about the Queen's demand. Marry her daughter? It seemed like a strange request, one that crossed the boundaries of diplomacy and into personal realms. The idea of becoming a pawn in this royal drama unsettled him. Yet his duty to humanity called for him to remain calm, to navigate the political minefield, and to focus on the bigger picture. Peace. The moment he reached the chamber where the princess awaited him, he took a deep breath. The heavy doors opened slowly, revealing a large room filled with intricate alien designs. The walls were adorned with shimmering patterns that seemed to move, and in the center stood the princess. She was seated on a raised platform, her posture regal, yet something in her eyes told the ambassador she was not as content as her appearance suggested. The princess was everything the ambassador had heard, tall, with deep purple skin that shimmered under the light. Her features were striking, sharp, almost too perfect. Yet, it wasn't her physical beauty that captivated him. It was the fire behind her gaze. She didn't look at him with the same cold, commanding presence her mother had, but rather with a hint of defiance and curiosity.
"You are the human the Queen has chosen?" Her voice was softer than he had anticipated, but it carried with it a sense of authority, something that suggested she wasn't used to being told what to do. The ambassador nodded, taking a step forward.
I am
And I understand the queen has her reasons for asking this of me.
The princess studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly. You are a diplomat, then. But you must know, I have no interest in this union.
She paused, a faint smile playing on her lips. I imagine you don't either. He hesitated for a moment.
I do not, but my duty to peace comes first.
This marriage, if it helps secure that peace, is something I must accept. Her expression shifted, her smile vanishing. I see, she said quietly. So, you're here not because of choice, but because you have no other option. The ambassador felt a twinge of guilt. He had never been one to shy away from difficult decisions, but this situation was different. The princess was not just another alien ruler. She was someone who had been forced into a system she couldn't control. He wondered how much of her life had been dictated by her mother, by the Empire's rules, and how much of it she had ever truly chosen for herself. It's not that simple, he replied. I came to negotiate peace, not to be part of your royal family. But if this is what it takes to ensure that peace, I will do it. The princess stood up and walked toward him, her movements graceful, but there was an edge to her every step. She was clearly unhappy with the situation. My mother believes that marriage is a tool, something to control. I am nothing more than a piece in her game. And now you are too. Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment he saw something that made him pause. A glimpse of vulnerability behind the walls she had built. I'm sorry, he said, not sure if he was apologizing for the situation or for himself. I didn't choose this either. She laughed bitterly.
You think you have no choice? You think this is a sacrifice for peace?
You're just another player in a game that has been going on long before you stepped onto this ship. He took a step forward, wanting to reach out, but unsure how. I'm not trying to play games. I'm trying to help both of our people. The princess turned away, walking to the far side of the room. And what if this is just a game for my mother? What if your peace means nothing to her, but another way to secure her power? The ambassador felt a knot tighten in his stomach.
I don't know, but I do know that if we don't at least try, we risk war.
The galaxy is already on edge. If this union helps prevent that, it's a price worth paying. The princess was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke again, her voice had softened.
You truly believe that?
I have to, he replied quietly. My people are counting on me to make the right decisions. She turned to face him again, her expression unreadable. And what of your own happiness? Does it matter to you at all? The question caught him off guard. He had never really thought about his personal happiness in the midst of his duties. There had always been a singular focus: to protect humanity, to secure alliances, and to maintain peace. But now, standing here, facing the princess, he wondered if that focus had cost him something more important: his own sense of self. I suppose I've never had the luxury of thinking about it, he admitted. Maybe that's my fault. The princess seemed to study him for a moment longer, then shook her head. Perhaps. But don't fool yourself into thinking that this will be easy, human. You're stepping into a world you know nothing about, and you may find that the stakes are higher than you ever imagined. He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. I'm not blind to the challenges. But if we want to avoid a war that could devastate both our peoples, we have to start somewhere. She turned away again, looking out a window at the distant stars. And, you think marrying me is the answer? I don't know, but it's the path we're on, he said. And I will do my best to make it work for both our peoples. There was a long pause before she spoke again. I suppose we'll see. But know this, human. If you think this will be easy, you are mistaken. And if you think my mother's games will end here, you are even more mistaken. He watched her, unsure of how to respond. This was not the encounter he had expected. The princess, who seemed to carry herself with such confidence, was not the cold, unfeeling ruler he had been led to believe she was. She was a prisoner in her own right, caught in a political system that demanded much more than she was willing to give. Before he could speak again, the doors to the chamber opened, and an attendant stepped inside. "Your Highness, the Queen requests your presence." The princess turned, her eyes meeting his one last time before she walked toward the door.
Remember what I said, she murmured. This is not over, no matter what the Queen thinks. The ambassador watched her leave, the weight of his decision settling deeper in his chest. He had come here to forge peace, but it seemed as though peace was the least of his worries now. The real question was whether he could navigate the treacherous waters of alien politics without losing everything he had fought for. As he walked back through the palace halls, his thoughts lingered on the princess. He had seen a glimpse of the person behind the royal mask, and it troubled him. There was so much more to her than he had expected. And now, as his future became ever more uncertain, he couldn't help but wonder if peace was truly the only thing he had to offer her.